The Promised Land, where God sealed his covenant with Israel, was meant to be a place of blessing, but it was already occupied by something wicked. Canaan hid burning altars, hungry gods, and rituals so dark that God forbade even speaking their names. What dwelled there wasn't human, so God destroyed it. But it hasn't disappeared. The ancient breach. After the flood, humanity began again. The earth was clean, washed, consecrated by judgment. Noah was the remnant of a broken world, the one found righteous among the corrupt. But even a righteous man can stumble. The story says Noah became a man of the soil. He planted a vineyard, drank of its fruit, and lay drunk and uncovered within his tent. It should have ended there. The text is deliberately vague. Was it mockery? Rebellion? Something darker? Whatever happened in that tent shattered the sanctity of the new covenant. When Noah awoke, he knew what his son had done, and his curse fell not on Ham, but on his child. Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. Why Canaan? Why not Ham? Scholars argue, perhaps Canaan shared in the act, or perhaps Noah saw in him the seed of what had been unleashed, a lineage marked for corruption. The sin was not simple lust or laughter. It was the first crack in the world's new foundation, a spiritual breach. Noah's blessing over Shem called on the Lord of holiness. His curse over Canaan echoed into the future, announcing a struggle that would one day define nations. What entered that bloodline that day? What shadow passed from father to son, and from son to land? Whatever it was, it wouldn't stay hidden forever. The curse had been spoken, and its fulfillment had only just begun. The land before Israel. Long before the tribes of Israel crossed the Jordan, the land already had kings, cities, and temples. Its hills echoed with prayers, but not to the God of Abraham. Canaan was ancient. Its people spoke of gods who ruled storm and sky, fertility and war. El, the father of gods, was their high deity, wise, distant, throned in the heavens. Yet it was his son, Baal, the lord of rain and thunder, who held the people's devotion. In a land where harvest depended on storms, they saw him as the giver of life, the one who opened the heavens or sealed them in drought. But that worship came with a price. To awaken the rain, they offered more than incense. Temples became the stage for ritual prostitution, men and women performing acts meant to please the divine powers. And when the skies stayed silent, they turned to something darker. Molech, the bronze god, arms open, furnace blazing. Into his grasp, parents laid their children, living offerings for prosperity, for rain, for favor. Archaeologists have unearthed the ashes that tell this truth. The bones of the young burned as prayers to an unholy God. God's command to Israel would come centuries later. Do not walk in their ways. Do not even speak their names. Their culture was not merely immoral, it was spiritually toxic. Every altar, every song, every festival was a mirror of heaven distorted by hell. To them, evil was sanctified. To heaven, it was intolerable. The Canaanite system wasn't just sin. It was a civilization built on inversion, where what was sacred became profane, and what was cursed was called divine. And so divine judgment was not born of cruelty, but of mercy, a quarantine for a disease that threatened the soul of the world. Because Canaan wasn't merely a land to be conquered, it was a contagion to be contained. Divine judgment or genocide. This is where the story turns uncomfortable, because the same God who parted the Red Sea and led his people with fire by night issued a command that shakes modern ears. Destroy everything that breathes, every man, every woman, every child. How can love speak in such severe language? How can holiness demand total destruction? To understand it, we must remember the promise made to Abraham 400 years before. Your descendants will return here, for the sin of the Amorites is not yet complete. God delayed his judgment. He waited generations, while corruption deepened, while fire consumed the innocent, while idols devoured what was sacred. When the measure of iniquity was full, mercy turned to justice. But even then, destruction was not the only story. The Canaanites were not exterminated because of their blood, but because of their belief. Their system had become irredeemable, yet individuals could still be saved. Rahab, a prostitute of Jericho, was spared, not through status, but through faith. The Gibeonites, though condemned by law, found life by surrendering to truth. Judgment was never blind cruelty. It was purity protecting creation itself. Ancient conquest literature used strong language, hyperbole that meant utter victory, not literal extinction. The text itself reveals survivors, migrations, alliances. The imagery was meant to emphasize that evil, not ethnicity, must be destroyed. So when God commanded, "Wipe them out," he wasn't speaking of genocide, but of eradication of infection. Because Canaan was a disease, not a race, a spiritual pandemic that spread through worship, art, and empire. Think of it like cauterization, burning away rot to save the living flesh, mercy through fire, judgment as quarantine. And yet, even in the ashes of Canaan, something survived. Not the people, but the pattern. The same darkness that filled their temples would appear again under new names, in new nations. And that haunting question remains. What if the real danger never died at all? The spirit that didn't die. The conquest of Canaan marked an end, but only to flesh and stone. The spirit behind the Canaanite corruption did not fade into history. Spiritual forces once worshipped openly as gods like Molech and Ishtar transformed, adapting to new forms and faces. What was once child sacrifice became modern exploitation, trafficking, and systemic abuse hidden behind closed doors. Temple prostitution today manifests as hypersexualization in media, where innocence is traded for attention and power. This spirit doesn't need an altar carved of bronze. It moves invisibly through screens, algorithms, and culture. The ancient demons are now systems and patterns disguised as freedom, pleasure, or progress. This truth creates a chilling awareness. If the temples of old no longer stand, their shadows still lengthen across our world. What if the brutal gods of Canaan don't scream in temples, but whisper in the devices we can't put down? The spirit that defiled the promised land lingers still, a living warning we must heed before it consumes us once more. Jesus said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be again." This statement is not a mere throwback, it is a prophetic warning. Before the flood, the world was filled with violence and corruption. Humanity had abandoned the path of holiness, turning inward, driven by selfish desires rather than divine covenant. The earth groaned under the weight of its own sin, much like today. Our modern world may not look like ancient Canaan, but the patterns are hauntingly familiar. We see towers built not to honor God, but to glorify self, progress without conscience, power without mercy. Pleasure becomes addiction, technology becomes temptation, and truth is drowned in relativism. The moral breakdown is not just an ancient story told in Scripture. It is unfolding now in our cities, our screens, our very minds. Like in Noah's time, the world is blinded to its own decay, lulled by distractions and false promises. Yet we are called not to hate the darkness, but to be its light, to expose it by shining with truth, courage, and holiness. If the spirit that infected Canaan still whispers in the halls of power and culture today, will we hear it? Will we respond? Because history is repeating itself, the cycle of blessing, breach, corruption, and judgment. And we stand at a crossroads. The days of Noah are not behind us. They are warning us, calling us to choose wisely before the flood returns. The question lingers in the silence. What did God see then that we still do not? Canaan, the land of promise, fell long ago. But its spirit did not die. That ancient corruption has outlasted cities, temple stones, and empires. The next battle will not be fought with swords or armies, but with truth and courage. If the spirit of Canaan still whispers in the shadows today, will we listen, or will we follow its voice into darkness once more? The choice is ours. But the answer may shape not just history, but eternity.